Hello friends! In today's video, I am going to be drawing in my sketchbook in real time with you while answering some of your questions. So feel free to grab your own art supplies and draw along with me, or you can grab a drink and a snack, so let's hang out. So before I begin the Q&A, I would like to say that when I filmed this video, I actually had recorded me answering your questions while I was drawing at the same time. And unfortunately, when I started to edit the footage, I realized that I am really not good at drawing and talking at the same time. Well, this is something I knew already, but you could also hear construction in the background, and it turned out worse than I expected it to. So I scrapped that audio entirely and I decided to re-record this voiceover instead. Also, I talk with my hands a lot, which you might see in the footage as well. Also, in this video, I am using a crescent render marker sketchbook with alcohol-based markers, color pencils, and some Pentel brush pens for the line art. I will list all the brands that I've used in the description down below. Okay, so now that's out of the way, onto the Q&A. So, first question, when did you start painting/drawing, and what was your biggest inspiration to start drawing? So, like most people, I of course had been drawing when I was a little kid, but it wasn't until I was about 12 or 13 when I really started to draw consistently and with more intention. If you've seen my SCREENCAP redraw videos, you might know that what inspired me to start drawing was Cardcaptor Sakura. And that pretty much just led to my obsession with anime. And it was, anime was my freaking life when I was a teenager. I drew a lot of anime fan art for different TV shows and movies. And then and then I just got hooked. The second question here, I want to start drawing again, and it has been about 5 years. Do you have any good tips to start with? So, first, I would say try and let go of any fear or hesitation you have about it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. Start small, and if you don't have any art supplies already, just use whatever you have laying around your house, like random pencils and pens on computer paper. You don't need to have fancy or expensive stuff to start creating. And in terms of what to draw, what interests you the most? Like what's the reason why you want to start drawing? And if that seems like a daunting, overwhelming question, just, pick like a nice photo of you taken, or you can just start by drawing objects around your house. Just keep it simple and just go at your own pace. Next question, who are your favorite artists on Instagram? Okay, so this is like a very overwhelming question for me because there are so many artists that I love. So to just kind of highlight as many as I can without it getting really crazy, I'm going to just have their handle and an example kind of scrolling on the side here. I'm not going to talk about every individual one because we will be here forever. And there's tons of artists that I won't end up including in this video as well. But the main takeaways, I think, from artists and artwork that inspires me is for sure, I'm drawn to really colorful and bold pieces. I also find that I am partial to traditional media. There's just something so tactile and satisfying about it, especially myself being mainly a traditional artist. Of course, that isn't to say that I'm not inspired by digital art. But yeah, there's just traditional media has like a very particular special place in my heart. I think when I see an artist who is really good with the whatever medium that they're using, it inspires me to keep pushing my own skill set as well. Next question. What body part is your least favorite to draw? This is probably not a surprising answer, but definitely hands and feet. I've drawn many hands over the years, and I don't know what it is. They're so complicated and difficult to draw. You'll actually probably see in this video, I erase and redraw the hand like 1,000 times. I even actually, I think, edited out a couple of them because I was like, this is getting out of hand. No pun intended. Why do you prefer drawing beautiful women over beautiful men? So I think a lot of artists who primarily draw women, including myself, get this question a lot. And if you are familiar with my work is very feminine. And a lot of my inspiration comes from fashion, makeup, and beauty trends. Of course, that isn't to say that men are and cannot be these things or be depicted with those things in mind. I've actually been wanting to draw Troye Sivan from his Blue music video, for example. It's incredibly inspiring, and I just love the looks in it. But I will say my art is also very driven by my desire to represent a diversity of women and depict them as strong, beautiful, fierce, and complex beings. And art can be a really personal thing. And being a woman myself, I feel a deeper connection to the female characters I create and illustrate. Each of them is like a small reflection of me in some way or another. And of course, like I said, men absolutely can be femme, and I do sometimes draw men in a more feminine way, such as the drag queen fan art that I did back in June during Pride. But yeah, I guess that's kind of a conundrum in of itself, because they're being presented as women, but they're actually men. So yeah, but yeah, traditionally masculine aesthetics just don't really resonate with me in a creative way, which is why most of the time I just, end up drawing women. So yeah, that's like the long answer. Okay, next question. Easiest medium to begin with after sketching. And then they list wet media like watercolor, acrylics, oil, etc. versus dry media like pencils, markers, etc. So for me, when I initially started drawing, I was using dry media first. So I used pencils, colored pencils, fine liners. It was more readily available to me to begin with, but also I do find it is easier to control and it's much more predictable because you're not having to worry about mixing your own colors and dealing with brushes and paint drying and all these other elements. I think that if you want to dive into adding color, if you're only working with pencils at the moment, definitely I think pencils and markers is an easier transition. Next question, beginner tips for starting with watercolor, gouache, acrylic. Okay, this is a very broad question, and the reason for that is each of those paint mediums are very different from one another. But if I were to give a general painting tip that would apply for all of them, would be if you feel like you're overwhelmed by having to mix your own colors, because that can be very difficult if you don't have a strong background or knowledge in color theory, I would say to start monochromatic. So have very limited color schemes first. That way you can focus on your values and getting the hang of the medium itself. So yeah, just start simple and ease yourself into it. I think that way you just don't feel like you're overcomplicating things. The next person asked, what kind of paper do you prefer using in watercolor, cold press or hot press? So for those of you who might not be familiar, cold press is watercolor paper that has a light texture, while hot press has a very smooth surface. So At the moment, I prefer using cold press, but I think that it's probably kind of a biased opinion because I have very little experience with hot press paper. But the experience that I do have with it, I found that trying to achieve a solid wash of color is much easier with cold press, whereas the hot press paper, it just turned out patchy. But again, I might just have to try a higher quality paper in the future to see if that makes a difference or if that's just kind of the nature of hot press paper in general. What is your favorite medium to work with? So, unsurprisingly, it's kind of a toss up between watercolor and acrylic wash for me. But I would say at this very moment, I think acrylic wash is kind of winning. I find there's just something so rich about using them and really satisfying. But I'm sure in a week or two, I'll probably prefer watercolor. Anything you want to improve on regarding your own work? Oh my gosh, how much time do you have? So many things. I think the big one for me though, definitely backgrounds and more complex pieces and having more interesting compositions. If you saw the examples of artists and artwork that I am inspired by that I showed at the beginning of the video, that is kind of like a common thing I'm noticing is that I really am drawn to these pieces that just are more involved. And that is something that I really want to put a lot of focus on moving forward because it's just more, yeah, I think it's just more rewarding. Obviously, it's going to take a long time to get a handle on that, but yeah, that's the big one. And then also, I do want to improve on my anatomy, of course. It's never going to be perfect. And also having more fluid slash dynamic poses as well, because I do find that my characters kind of look stiff. So maybe I'll have to do some more life drawing or something like that. The next person asked, do you think your art and process of making your art pieces has improved the way you want it? So I am a very impatient person. So of course I wish I improved faster than I do. Nothing is more frustrating than having a vision in your mind of an illustration and then when you actually put it to paper, it completely pales in comparison. But the reality is it's going to take time. And it's hard to see your progress day to day, but I find that when I look back and compare my work to my previous pieces from a year ago or 5 years ago, that's when you see the real improvement. And that's something that I try to do more often so that it just reminds me of the journey that I actually have taken. But also, I will say that I do wish I had more time, just in general, because having to keep up with creating content for Instagram, YouTube, merchandise, etc., it really does slow down the process of improving my skills because I feel like I have less room for experimentation because of my fear of failure or the idea that whatever I spend time making has to be good enough to be content for the internet. And I feel like that's really contradictory advice because I'm often telling other people to let go of that fear and to experiment. It's like that Alice in Wonderland quote. I give myself very good advice, but I very seldom follow it. So do as I say and not as I do. What is your dream art piece or project you want to complete? So there's quite a few. I always have more ideas than time to actually execute them. But the main one that I've been really itching to work on is a while back, I had done a bunch of illustrations based on some of the Grimm's Brothers fairy tales for a coloring book. And because it was a coloring book, I only ever did the line work for them. So I would absolutely love to revisit all of those illustrations and actually paint them myself. How did you start off your Instagram and have companies give you things to review? I think I'll probably make an entire video dedicated to growing your Instagram/social media platform. It is definitely something that I get a lot of questions about. But the short answer for now is post consistently and be involved and active in the community. Because if you just, post something online and then disappear, it's just not as engaging as opposed to posting something and actually replying back to the comments or commenting on other artists' work, and the kind of back and forth. I think really helps give you an audience that feels more invested in you and is more likely to support you. So yeah. And to address the second half of the question, by growing my social media presence was how companies found me. I have never personally reached out to a company myself, but I will say the benefit of being a traditional artist and because of the way I photograph my work, I sometimes will tag the relevant companies and brands if their product was featured in the illustration. So whether they found me that way or just happened to stumble upon my page, who knows? Maybe both. I'm not really sure. Oh, but please, for the love of all that is holy, do not tag like 10 artists on your Instagram post if they are not actually relevant to the artwork that you made. It is such a huge pet peeve of mine, and I'm sure to other artists as well, to see someone tagging them when the piece that they made or the post that they made has literally nothing to do with them. It doesn't actually create a genuine connection with that person. It just comes off really spammy and is probably just doing the opposite of what you want it to do. So moving on from that, next question is, how is your illustration career going? I want to enroll into art university and pursue the same. Can you give some advice for people who want to do the same as you? So for those of you who don't already know, I actually am not a full-time artist and I did not go to school for illustration. I actually currently work a day job part-time and I went to school for graphic design. So I might not be the best person to provide advice on that particular question, but if you really want to pursue illustration, that's really what you're passionate about, and you think that university will benefit you, then absolutely go for it. Obviously, do your research and see if you can apply for grants or financial help if that's a struggle for you. But being totally self-taught is doable, but you really have to be super self-driven, really disciplined, and you will be starting from zero. Because if you go to school, there's structure, you're in an environment of like-minded people, and it gives you the opportunity to network with your peers and professors. So it just really depends on the type of learner you are and what kind of environment you think you would thrive in. What is your dream career? And if you aren't working in your dream career, your job currently, why did you choose them? So obviously the dream would be an illustrator and content creator full-time. As I mentioned earlier, I went to school for graphic design. So coming to the conclusion of wanting to be an independent artist took me quite some time. I also choose to work my retail day job because, well, one, financial stability, and also because the hours are quite flexible there. And so that gives me room to take time off if I need certain days to do an art market or convention, or if I'm particularly busy with my art business, I can, the hours are very flexible. So I do intend to make a dedicated video about my art journey, so stay tuned for that. How'd you end up on YouTube and why? Was it a certain person or motivation? So an art YouTube channel is something that I actually have been thinking about for a really long time. And the main thing was because people often ask me about my process, about, how I use this or how I use this product. And I think it's just easier to understand when you can actually see it, especially as artists are visual people. It's not the same as trying to explain it over text. And another reason was I wanted a way to create a stronger connection to you guys, my audience, because as much as I love Instagram, it's so fleeting. People, are scrolling through their feeds so quickly. They see the artwork, maybe they'll make a comment and then they move on. Whereas YouTube, you could be spending 5, 10, 15, maybe an hour watching somebody's, video and getting to know them. So I just felt like it just made more sense in terms of getting better insight into my process, but also me as a person. On to another YouTube related question. I'm curious if you feel like the effort you put into your videos is worth it to you financially. When you started, did you want to give up? I am quite new to YouTube. My first upload was less than a year ago, and I was very sparse about making videos because it was and still is a lot of work. And at the time, I never made it a priority, but I never intended to give up. It was just always put on the back burner until I felt like I could dedicate more time to it. But eventually, I realized that I wasn't going to magically have more time allotted to me because I was still working my day job and still, so finally in December of last year, I decided I was going to make time for it. Although, ironically, now given our current climate, my retail day job has closed indefinitely, so I guess now I do magically have more time. But I will say I feel very fortunate to have hit the monetization requirements so much sooner than I had anticipated. And of course, like being able to make actual money directly from YouTube is great. But my end goal was never to be a full-time quote unquote YouTuber per se. My intention, like I mentioned earlier, is to show you guys my process and to connect with you. So bottom line, creating my YouTube channel was 100% worth it. And even though I already had a following on Instagram, I assumed that the majority of my YouTube audience would have been from there. But to my surprise and my delight, I have gained many new subscribers and that have, discovered me on YouTube, which has broadened my reach. So if you are thinking about YouTube and you're not sure if you want to do it, I absolutely recommend it because you might see a new audience that you would not have gotten otherwise. How do you deal with people asking for free art? I've had this happening a lot lately and I find it quite discouraging. I absolutely don't blame you. Getting asked for free art is never fun, especially when it's friends or family. That's always a really uncomfortable situation. But at the end of the day, it's still work. And like any kind of work, whether it's creative or not, requires a special skill, time, and energy. And I think that's something that is definitely you should stress to whoever it is that is asking for free art. But if you don't want to have that conversation, for me in the past, when I used to get a lot of DMs or comments that were along the lines of, "Oh my God, can you draw me?" The best reply I found was something along the lines of, "Sure, here are my commission rates," or "I'm currently not taking commissions right now." And that way, it helps demonstrate to the person that your services don't come for free, but you also don't come off as being defensive. Because I definitely remembered someone had asked me, "Oh, can you draw me?" Which is kind of ambiguous because you don't necessarily know if they are expecting it to be free or if they are intending to pay you. And sometimes my knee-jerk reaction would be, "I don't do free art." And I remembered someone being like, oh, I was intending to pay you, but I didn't like that attitude, so bye. And that was kind of the hard lesson for me. So yeah, that's when I decided, I was like, okay, let's just cut that out and just be like, here are my rates. So that would be my advice in terms of dealing with that kind of stuff. And yeah, if you don't want to draw things for people, then you can just say my commissions are closed. And then when it comes to friends and family, if you feel bad or uncomfortable about charging them, I would say what you can do is you charge them, but give it a discount and tell them that they're getting a friend or family discount. That way they still feel like, they're being recognized as having a connection with you, but you are still getting compensated for the work that you're doing. Have you ever been in a really bad art block? If yes, what is the longest time you've been in one? I think every creative person will encounter artist block, whether it be in music or writing, visual arts. It's just naturally, it's going to happen. I feel like you're never going to be 100% all the time because it can be pretty draining. But I will say that for me, if I'm feeling like I'm in a rut, I'll do a photo study. Whether it be I'm lacking inspiration or just finding that everything I make looks like garbage, I find that doing a photo study, that way I'm taking out the brain power required to create something, interesting or conceptual. And then I'm also using my energy to improve my skills. But if I really can't bring myself to draw or paint that day, but I still want to be productive, I will just kind of shift my work and I'll fulfill shop orders or answer emails, make to-do lists, edit my videos, etc. Just something else. That way I don't have that guilt of not making artwork because I'm still working towards all the other things that help my art business. Which leads us to our next question. I like drawing and painting, but I only seem to be able to do it based on reference. When I try to do it quote unquote from my head, there is zero inspiration and my brain feels blank. Is there a way to overcome this blockade? Also, how does it feel to get told that you're the reason that a complete stranger is starting to make art because you inspired them? So to address the first part of the question, creating art based from reference is definitely not a bad thing. Even the old masters would have a real model sit next to them for hours so that they had a direct reference to paint from. Of course, there is a difference between copying a photographer's work exactly and then trying to say that it's completely your own or profit from it. But if you're wanting to explore art without a reference, I would say to take it step by step. So start by using a reference as the starting point, but then change little things about it. Like, for example, if you're painting a portrait, you can just change the hair color or add an accessory, etc. And then with every piece that you make, try to deviate from the original reference more and more. And then hopefully you will eventually come to the point where you don't always necessarily need to have a reference. And I think that's like the way that references should be used, is that it's just sort of a base. It just gives you a point, like a very light framework to make what you want to make. And to address the last part of your question, I am always so humbled and so flattered when someone tells me that I have inspired or motivated them to make art. That's probably like the highest compliment I could receive. It's mind-boggling to know that, one, so many of you like my work, and then on top of that, I somehow encourage you to also make art. It's just like such a nice community that we've built here, and it makes me so happy. Shifting gears into something entirely different. Next question is, when is your sketchbook flip through? So my friend Kyung is always asking for a sketchbook flip through. She's literally been asking me for years. Kyung, if you're watching this, hello. And the reason I haven't done a sketchbook flip through is because I almost never actually finish any sketchbooks. I have a few that are nearly done. So the goal this year is to finish as many as I can so I actually can make some videos that show you guys my sketchbook. But yeah, I definitely have that bad habit of getting through half of one and then giving up on it and moving on to the next one. So all of my sketchbooks are spanning years. Like it'll be the first few pages will have been from like 2016, and then the next few pages will be from 2018, and the last half will probably be from this year. So it's going to be really disjointed, but it also might be interesting to see my kind of growth from like within one sketchbook. So shifting gears and moving on to some more personal questions, not like personal, but ones that are not quite as rooted in art. So this person asked, do you like to read books or webtoons? If so, books or genres that you prefer. And then they also asked, if you read any webtoons, do you consider making one? And then they have a bunch of awesome recommendations that I will have up here on the screen if you are also interested. So to address the first section of the question, I do like to read books, and I unfortunately have not gone around to any webtoons yet. So I definitely don't read nearly as much as I want to because I just don't have as much time, I think, as I would like. But Harry Potter is something that I revisit quite often, which is so ridiculous. It's just like, why don't I read something new instead? But it's just so comforting. And then for webtoons, I have heard really, really good things about Lore Olympus. I've heard about it for a little bit, and it's something that has definitely been on my to-do list because it seems right up my alley. I have such an interest in the art style and the subject, so hopefully I can get around to actually reading it at some point, and all of your other fantastic suggestions. And to answer the second part of the question, do you consider making any webtoons? I never considered myself a narrative storyteller, and so creating a comic or graphic novel is just not something that's ever really been on my mind. I've always been someone who has an interest in creating standalone pieces. When I was in high school, I initially thought that I wanted to do animation because I had such an affinity for anime and animated shows and TV shows, movies, I should say. And so naturally I thought, oh, I want to be an animator. And then when I realized the amount of work that is required to do animation, you could be working on the same project for months. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm really impatient, so that sounds agonizing to me. I'm definitely the type of person where I want to work on something and then be done and over with and move on to the next one fairly quickly. So yeah, unfortunately, comics probably not really on my radar. I'd like to know if you could imagine your life without painting. What would you do? And also, what are your hobbies? So, reading that first question, I feel like my life just flashed before my eyes. Not being able to create art is probably my worst nightmare. I've literally said this many times to my friends, is if I were somehow to lose my hands, I would be useless. I would be totally useless. I have never really felt like I was good at anything else. And so I put all of my energy and time into creating art. And so when your hobby has turned into your career, I don't really know what else there is about me. It's yeah, art is something that's just like really ingrained into who I am. I will say though, something that I've been wanting to do but haven't made time for is embroidery, which I guess is an offshoot of creating art. It's just very different, but it is very, very time consuming. I've only done a couple as like gifts for my coworkers, but I just love how it looks. And yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's so fun. And that would be my future hobby, potentially. I'm also realizing that makes me sound really lame. Like, I don't do sports, I don't play an instrument, I'm not interested in things like rock climbing, or I don't know. I can't even think of anything else. My life is so limited. Wow. But I guess another thing, I don't know if this would technically be a hobby, but I do like to travel. Obviously, given the crazy times that we're in right now, traveling is not an option. But I do love going to new places and exploring new food and, cities. But yeah, I don't know if that's technically a hobby. Next question. What kind of music or songs get you in the creative mood? So, I don't know about you guys, but for a very long time, and maybe still sometimes now, when I got that question, when someone asked me what kind of music I listen to, it really stressed me out. And it's a very common question to ask because it says a lot about somebody and it's a point of connection and reference for people. But for a really long time, particularly I think in my teenage years and early college years, I was always wanting to seem really, really cool and I don't know, whatever. And now I've come to the realization that just own who you are. It's totally fine. You don't have to seem something that you're not. And so the type of music that I listen to for the most part is pop music. And yeah, that sounds super lame. But it's true. That's the majority of what I listen to. And I do listen to kind of a wide array of pop, if that makes sense, like all of its subgenres. So, of course, the current pop music, like Dua Lipa, Ariana Grande, Lady Gaga's new song is super fun. And then there's the alt pop, I guess you would call it, such as Charlie XCX, Rina Sawayama, Christine and the Queens, Robin. I think that kind of facet of pop is probably my favorite. I've been listening to Christine and the Queens' new EP, I think, so much lately. And I actually had tickets to see Rina Sawayama for May, but unfortunately it got canceled and is postponed to September. So hopefully everything is back to normal by that point so I can go see her. And yeah, I saw Charlie XCX and Robin live, not together, but I have seen them live in my lifetime. And both of them were fantastic. So fun. Oh, I guess that's a hobby, right? That's a hobby. I go to concerts sometimes. And then other kind of subgenres, I guess R&B pop, is that a thing? I don't know, but I really like Lizzo. I like Janelle Monáe. A big fan of indie pop as well, such as the 1975 and Haim. And maybe one of my favorites is throwback pop and R&B, particularly from the late 90s and early 2000s, because I am such a 90s baby. So I actually made like a playlist with all those nostalgic songs from the likes of, the Spice Girls and Aaliyah. I was really into J-Lo during that era. So fun. That's probably the type of music that gets me really excited, as well as Disney soundtracks. Oh man, if I have the apartment to myself, you best believe I'm putting on some good old Disney music and just singing my dang heart out. Particularly the ones from what is called the Disney Renaissance. So all the ones from the 90s, basically, from Little Mermaid, which technically was 89, and then all the way up until Tarzan, which I think was 99. Correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, those are my favorites. And a couple soundtracks as well, like Broadway soundtracks, such as Wicked, which I got to see live a number of years ago, and I still listen to that soundtrack pretty frequently. It's amazing. And earlier this year, I got to see Anastasia on Broadway, and that was so good. It was also very nostalgic because I grew up loving that animated film, and the music is great. Yeah. Oh, but also, I guess another throwback for me that I listened to here and there. During my high school years, I was all about the pop punk. So again, still pop music, but really going in on the angsty teenage vibes. So yeah, I still listen to Paramore, but was particularly obsessed with Paramore and bands like that in my teens. And yeah, the newer Paramore album, After Laughter, it's great. Hayley Williams is now doing her own thing, and that album is great. A number of years ago, Fall Out Boy and Paramore did a joint tour, and even though I had been out of my teenage years by that point and didn't listen to them as rabidly as I used to, I was like, man, I owe it to my 16-year-old self to go to this concert, and it was so fun. So fun. So yeah, pop music. That's my jam. Okay, and I think we are going to be on the last question because it's a bit of a long one. And that question is, what's your favorite show / anime? So that is a very big task to tackle. So I think I'll keep it with just animated TV shows to try and simplify it a little bit. But when I was thinking about this question, I was like, okay, what defines a favorite TV show? And for me, I think if it's something that I've watched multiple times and haven't gotten sick of it, and or something that has like really inspired me as an artist. So I'll start with the non-anime ones. So the first one, of course, that comes to mind is Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's incredible. The world building and the universe of The Last Airbender, it's so interesting, and the characters and story are very engaging and really well thought out, and they have such amazing arcs throughout the series. Most of the characters are like really, really well fleshed out. And I've probably watched this entire series all the way through like at least like 6 times. The Legend of Korra, though, it wasn't the same. I was kind of disappointed, but we won't get into that. The animation was good, but anyway. Another one, the animated Batman series. The style is so cool, and it's the series where Harley Quinn originated from, which is amazing. And I just adored all the episodes with her and Poison Ivy teaming up. Those were my favorite. They're iconic. And staying within the DC universe, I also really love Teen Titans. Not Teen Titans Go. I must make that distinction very clear. I am still salty that the show ended prematurely, especially because I was recently told that apparently why they got canceled was because the network or someone, whoever, had found out that the show had a very large female audience, which in turn made them think that they wouldn't be able to sell merchandise, which is infuriating. Absolutely would have bought merchandise if I could at the time. Anyway, I wish they had brought it back and not Teen Titans Go. Moving on to something else. Another TV show that's a little bit newer that I really love is Gravity Falls. The style and story are fantastic. I recently rewatched it and it was just as fun and interesting the first couple times I watched it. It's on Disney Plus, so yeah, great show. And then moving on to some of my favorite animes. First comes to mind is always Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, specifically. It's amazing. It's really amazing. Similar to The Last Airbender, it's a show that I have revisited many times and have never gotten tired of it. There are story arcs within the show that genuinely make me cry because you just get so invested and the storytelling is so good. Yeah, it's great. You should check it out, honestly. It's always the one that I recommend to people who don't necessarily have an affinity for anime but are potentially curious about it. It's like top tier for sure. And then some other favorites for me, of course, Sailor Moon and Cardcaptor Sakura. They really informed my childhood and the artwork that I make, and whenever I go back to watch them, they just fill me with so much joy. They make me so happy. And currently, I'm really enjoying My Hero Academia. I think it's a really fun twist to the superhero genre, and many of the characters are really endearing, and it's overall just like a really fun, entertaining show. My friend and I are watching it together, and Bakugo is absolutely our favorite, but I will say we are not crazy about this current arc in the newest season because there is not enough of him in it, basically. We are always yelling at the screen being like, where is Bakugo? So yeah, but I am really enjoying the show overall. Anyways, those are all the questions I'm going to answer for this video. I didn't get around to all of them, but if you guys like this type of video, I will definitely be happy to do another one. And yeah, I know that a lot of us are currently social distancing and are spending a lot of more time at home. So I figured that my YouTube videos could be a place for some escapism and a break from all the stress and craziness that's going on. And yeah, like many of you, I've got more time on my hands, so definitely hoping that I can channel my energy into posting more on YouTube. And I have also been doing more live streams on my Instagram, which have been so fun. I know that I typically don't post such long ass videos like this one, mainly because I had no idea if anyone would even be interested in it. So let me know in the comments if you like these long form videos, and I will be happy to make more of them. I hope that you're all staying safe and healthy, and if this video or any of my videos can provide some comfort to you, that is really all I can ask for. And if you happen to be making art or drawing along with me, let me know in the comments what you made. I would love to know what you were working on while I was drawing. And yeah, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!